Hey, what is going on everyone? After Infinity here, and welcome to this behind the scenes video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of scenes I did for Animation Life 3, which is the latest animation from Black Plasma Studios. Definitely check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so the first scene that we're going to take a look at is the first scene in the animation, and it's this kind of weird, dark dream sequence in which this character, the Derp, he's having this nightmarish kind of vision in this weird hellish landscape called the Nether. Now, there's a bunch of sound design crazy things in this project, but I'm going to focus on a couple of sounds that all share the same concept, which is using found sounds, so sounds that you find on the internet or sounds that you record yourself, and processing them and pitching them around and using crazy effects to achieve a completely different and cool result. Okay, so the first sound that we're going to take a look at is this sound right here, and I'll play it in context just so you can hear that. So that's the sound in context. Now we'll play it in solo here. So that's the sound we're going to be focusing on. Basically, if we take off all the effects, and this is kind of in part to drive home the point that you really can use any sound and make it sound cinematic and cool, you can see that it's actually just this sound. So I'm sure many of you will recognize that. If we take a look at the effects that I've used on it, we'll turn them on sort of one by one. First, it's this effect here, which is a bandpass filter, so it's cutting out all the high end and all the low end and adding a bunch of distortion, so that makes it sound like this. That just kind of prepares it for going through the reverb, limits the frequency range, narrows it in the middle, makes it more, more dark sounding, I guess. So we'll turn on the reverb plugins, and now it sounds like this. Okay, so we've kind of put it in a room, sounds like it's maybe in a cave or something, which is appropriate for the scene, but it doesn't quite sound washed out and cinematic enough, so we're going to add two delay plugins. The first one is what makes up most of the sound. It's called Replica, and it's on the diffusion setting. This is an awesome plugin. Like, this diffusion setting thing is amazing. It'll blow your mind. So we'll turn that on. And another delay plugin. This one lets you add distortion to the delay return, which creates a really cool sound. So I'll turn these on, and you can hear it's now just this kind of washed out cinematic stinger type of sound. So there's proof that you really can use any sound and make it sound cool and cinematic. Okay, so the second sound is this one here, and I'll play it in solo. So as you can hear, that is the lava sound. This underscores the whole scene because it all takes place in this big lava cave. And this, if we take off all the effects and the reverb, you can hear it sounds like this. And that is actually a sound recording of my kettle. When it boils, of course, all the water comes up, and it's an electric kettle, so it doesn't whistle or anything, so it's a great opportunity just to get this bubbly, weird kind of sound that you can use in a lot of applications. In this case, it's kind of being made into the lava. Pretty simple processing. I think this file actually has some processing on it already. I don't think that's actually the raw recording, but it sounds fairly similar to it. The fact that water boiling is a liquid that's bubbling kind of makes it already sound like lava, so there's not much I had to do to it, honestly. Just some filtering, because if we take that off, you can hear that really does sound like a kettle because there's all that high end, but lava being very thick and dense, you don't generally associate that having a lot of high end, so we cut that all out, and that sounds like this. All right, so you get this very, very dark, kind of creepy, weird lava sound. So that's a good example of like fairly minimal processing, but just a found sound that really fits the application. Okay, so the last sound that I wanted to show you guys from this scene is this one here, and it plays during this weird kind of creepy shot of the derp investigating this faceless figure, which is really weird and unsettling. So I wanted the sound to give you that feeling as well. Okay, so I made this using Serum, which is a soft synth, so it's not a found sound, but it uses a concept that I think is useful to have in your repertoire if you're a sound designer, which is bouncing something you've made in a synth down to audio and then having the ability to chop it up and put more effects on it. So originally, if we look at, I think this is the original one. No. Okay, so we'll look at this one. So if we take all the effects off, you can hear that it sounds different. It's not quite where I wanted it to be. So one thing that you can do, and I'll play that for you in solo again because that was with all the other stuff. So that's how it sounded when I made it, just with the synth and a bunch of effects. But I wasn't quite happy with it. So what I did is I bounced this whole thing down to audio, and so I was able to chop it up and kind of control the the modulation of it a little bit more and the placement of the sounds. Not the modulation, rather, because that would be in the synth, but like where the sounds play specifically. Because when you're in MIDI, when you're working with the synth, it's a synth and drawing out modulation curves. It's kind of hard to like do that, make it sound cool, and sync something up with a scene. So one thing that you can do, apart from just now being able to add more effects to it, which is a nice way to just keep adding effects without breaking your computer, is bouncing all those first effects down to audio and then adding more effects, as you can see I've done here. But the biggest advantage of doing that is that you have much finer control over how the sound syncs up with the scene, because with audio clips, as opposed to MIDI, you can very easily just fade them in and like move them around. If I wanted to like extend something out, or like you can see there's like, I've done a whole bunch of weird, crazy, this file is actually really weird. Let me play it for you. Right, it's just like this really creepy, unsettling batch of weird synth sounds. But when you bounce it down to audio, as you can see, you're able to just take little bits from it and chop it down to fit with the scene and to actually serve a purpose. So yeah, that's something that if you're a sound designer and you're working with a synth, I highly recommend trying bouncing it down to audio and syncing it up with the scene that way. It's super, super useful. Okay, so that is about it for this project. Let's move on to the next scene that I did in the animation. Okay, so here we are in the other scene for the animation that I did. This one's near the end. It's also kind of a dreamy, ethereal type of scene, but in more of a light, nostalgic kind of way. So in this scene, Steve, this character Steve here, he returns to all the stuff he built in original vanilla Minecraft. So of course, what better to do than use the original Minecraft music? So what I've done here is this kind of cover recreation version of the Minecraft track from, I think it's the Alpha music by C418. I've done my best to kind of recreate the tone of the piano sound that he used in the original track. So I'm just going to break down for you how I went about recreating that. Okay, so what I heard from the original track was, and I have no idea how C418 made it. I don't know if it was a piano sound, a single sound, or a bunch of sounds. I have no idea. But what I heard from it was that there were 3 distinct layers, being the very kind of sparkly, not sparkly, but like just resonant high-end frequencies that are sort of bell-like, the mid-range frequencies, which sounded to me more like a piano, and there's this kind of low resonance as well. So that's what I've done here in the recreation. I've made 3 different layers, a high layer, a mid layer, and a low layer. And I'll play the whole thing in context just so you can hear it, and then I'll break down each layer. So that's the whole bunch of layers together. The first layer here, this one is a piano. I couldn't tell whether the original song was a piano. Like at first listen, it sounds like a piano, and you think it's a piano, but upon listening a bunch of times, I started to doubt that. I wasn't sure because it also doesn't sound like a piano, but I've used a piano here as the mid layer. So I'll play this in solo for you. So as you can see, that kind of sits right in the middle, where I want it to. So this is a grand piano, and what I've done to give it this kind of very soft lullaby-like tone that mimics the original is I've taken this tone knob and just whacked it all the way to soft. I don't know what this does. I don't know if it's like an EQ or something they did with the sampling or not. I have no idea, but it sounds great when you just whack it all the way to soft. I've also closed the lid all the way. It's nice that they include the ability not only to open the lid or close the lid, but you can do halfway as well. That's really cool. But I've gone and closed it all the way. I've also added this EQ, which is just completely cutting out all of the low end, all of the high end. It was already a pretty mid-focus sound anyway, as you can hear if I turn that off. Right, it was already pretty mid-heavy, but if we turn that back on, you can hear it makes it sound much more like small and detailed. So yeah, that is the mid layer. Let's have a look at the top layer, which is this bell sound, and I'll play it for you here. This is probably my favorite of the three layers. It's really, really resonant and very beautiful in the high end. And if we look at it on a spectrogram, you can see there that there's the resonance sits higher up above the piano, which is what I wanted. So if we look at the virtual instrument, it's a Celesta or Celesta. I have no idea how to say that, but it's from the Kontakt factory library. If you have Kontakt, then you'll know it comes with a bunch of instruments that you just get with it. I found that the small melodic percussion instruments like this one are actually really good in the factory library. So that's what I've used. There's this new one here from the new factory library, and then this one's from the legacy factory library. So it's a layer of two. And then as with the piano, I've gone and cut out all the high end, because if we turn that off, you can hear it's much more recognizable as some sort of bell instrument, whereas if we take that EQ and put it back on, we're just getting, and if I turn the spectrogram back on here, you can see we're cutting out everything above the little fundamental resonances there. So that makes it sit really nicely where I wanted. So yeah, that's the high layer. Let's take a look at the low layer. Okay, so this is the low layer, and it sounds like this. It's very quiet, but it adds that very warm, low resonant kind of sound that I wanted. So again, as you can see, I've taken an EQ and just completely sliced out one section of the spectrum. This is this sound here. It's made of two, but this layer in particular is a sound from Omnisphere, which is one of the Vibes presets. These are awesome. I love these. But yeah, pretty well just that EQ on this layer and some reduction of the attack, because being a bell sound, it has kind of this pingy attack that I didn't want. So that sounds like this. God, you can barely hear it, but it's definitely important, because if you take it out, it kind of loses that organic sound to the low resonance. And the reason for that is that the other layer is actually a synth. So if we listen to that, you can hear it does sound more synth-like. So together they sound very organic and sit nice and warmly in the low end. Warmly? Is that a word? It's not a word. But we'll have a quick look at the synth patch. And this is something that I like to do, which is just interesting stuff with sine waves. I feel like sine waves are vastly underserved, just in general in synthesis. But for this type of music, having sine waves and just doing detuning and weird stuff with them is really advantageous because you're going for an organic type of sound. And of course, sine waves generally sound, especially when you make them all weird and phasey, they sound pretty organic. So that's the synth sound. If you have Serum, you can take a look at that and see what I've done there. I've gone and widened the stereo image quite a bit, just because that's how I was hearing it in the original. But yeah, that is all 3 layers, and a little brief overview on how you can take a sound that you hear and try and recreate it. Okay, so the last sound that I'll show you is one that is very near the end, and it's this pluck sound here, which echoes the main melody. And I'll play this for you in context. Sounds like this. So as you can hear, that echoes the main Minecraft melody as he's looking at the sword. It's this kind of zoom in shot on his face. Very nostalgic feeling. So I figured putting the theme and really highlighting the theme would be a good idea there. Now, this is made up of 2 separate sounds, as you'll find with a lot of stuff that I do. It's layered, right? So you put sounds on top of each other, they sound more interesting together and more unique. So I'm going to highlight a technique actually that I've done here that I use quite a bit, and it's when you have little like sparse piano melodies like this that you want to play in the high end. Of course, naturally you'd reach for a piano, so one of the layers here is a piano. It's a very unique sounding piano, but still a piano. Sounds like this. So that's this una corda instrument. I love this thing. It's really cool. But it still sounds piano-ish. But one thing you can do to help make those sparse little piano melodies sound kind of unique is add pizzicato strings. So as you can hear, I've done that here. Right, so of course lots of reverb. Now if you turn off the reverb, they sound kind of comedic, and you'll hear that here. Right, so these are like the kind of like Kevin MacLeod comedy strings, kind of, almost. But when you take and you put reverb on them and you layer them with a piano, they sound really pretty. I'll just play that here for you. And that's just a great way to add some uniqueness to your little high piano melodies. You can use this in an arpeggio form or in this kind of sparse highlighting a melody sort of thing like I've done here. So yeah, that's a really cool technique that I use all the time. One thing that's great to do in general is just to experiment with layering. If you have a sound that is kind of where you want it, but you're not entirely happy with it, or it sounds too much like a piano or too much like strings or whatever, and you want it to sound unique, just try layering weird, interesting other instruments around it. That's a fantastic technique just for adding uniqueness to any sound. Okay, so that's everything I think that I was going to talk about. Yeah. Definitely let me know if this is something that you'd like to see more of, more like little behind the scenes production type videos. If that's something you guys are interested in, I'll definitely try and do more. But yeah, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more music.